It's 8:15 in Vancouver. We're back in our studio. I'm Dennis Mazar, and joining me is my colleague Alexander Gerson. Our guest this morning is entrepreneur and public figure Denis Yeliseyev. Sasha, hi. Good morning, Dennis. Good afternoon. Hello. We're glad to see you. Glad to hear you.
Hello, Dennis. Hello, Alexander. Hello, dear viewers.
Hi, Dennis. I just listened to your interview. I think it was an hour ago. Was it a stream or a video with Alexander Shellist, right?
Yesterday, yes, we did it yesterday, yes.
And that was yesterday, right? It all came down to a choice and what is happening. Of course, we're going to ask you all these questions, and we were really looking forward to you coming and telling us what you think about what's happening. But even though I'm criticized for bringing up Gennady Balashov's etiquette more often than I probably should, today is December 11th. Gennady Viktorovich passed away on November 11th, so it's been 1 month since his passing. And during this time, so many events have already happened that it feels like he's either been gone for an eternity or, on the contrary, that it never happened at all. So once again, Gennady Balashov was a part of Radio Vera, and today it's exactly 1 month since this person is no longer with us. But that's life.
Yes, yes.
And of course, today, everyone is asking whether there will be elections or not, what they will be like, whether they are needed, and how this will affect the situation of the war between Russia and Ukraine. It's been going on for so long now.
Yes. Yesterday, President Trump made a statement. You heard that 82% of Ukrainians want the war to end, and he insists on elections. And now it's part of a huge public discussion, part of the work, propaganda, and basically the agenda.
Dennis, I'm curious, where does Donald Trump get such statistics from? Do you remember when he talked about 4% support for Volodymyr Zelensky? No, I absolutely agree. I admit that, of course, most Ukrainians want the war to end. That's natural. Just a question. I'm curious. But he never refers to like opinion polls or some public opinion center. He usually just gives some number. It's unclear where he got it from. What do you think?
Well, basically, Trump can say whatever number he needs in each specific case. Right now, he's actually pretty close to the truth. When he said 4% for Zelensky, I'll say this. If there were elections, Zelensky would get 4%. But if we look at the polls, Trump relies on secret polls and, for example, on Rasmussen as well. They sometimes consider Gallup. 82% is an absolutely reasonable figure, but that's if you ask without dictatorship, because right now people are intimidated, they're afraid. The other 18% include war profiteers, those who ended up there, people who can't imagine life without war, and the completely thoughtless. They aren't fighting, but they want it to go on.
Well, yes. Dennis, well, of course, by the way, we've brought up the issue of elections many times, and in our conversations with Gennady Balashov, we've also talked a lot about this. So as I understand it, everything revolves around one thing, right? So to speak, Zelensky is showing in every way that he's not against it, that he's ready, please. And even he, in my opinion, mentioned numbers like 60 to 90 days, that he's ready to hold elections within that time frame. The key is ensuring security. There are two key points here. First, martial law, which, as I understand, is written into the Ukrainian constitution and can't be changed. That means Zelensky simply can't do this on his own. And the second point is really about security. How can you hold elections when there's a war going on and bombs are falling on people?
I'll start with the last point about security and answer you right away. It's a pity. I could have aired this. We have a huge mall in Kyiv, a shopping center, a huge one. Lavina is called Lavina Mall. They opened the Christmas tree there. Look at the number of people present there. There's a good word for it, but I can't say it on air. People will go crazy when they see it. Look at Dorofiva's concerts. Look, they held music festivals. That's thousands of people, which is actually quite dangerous during wartime. That doesn't stop anyone. Trust me, that's just a myth. That's regarding safety. Regarding the Constitution, according to the Constitution, a referendum cannot be held. But as for elections, the law can be changed and allowed. Our parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, should adopt it and hold them during martial law. But I don't agree with you, Dennis. Because it's important that viewers who don't live in Ukraine aren't influenced by the way Zelensky presents all this. He even went head to head with Trump. We can discuss this separately if needed. This is another attempt to cheat, because if they push this through parliament, they'll approve elections in a single round. Yes, under martial law, but we can't delay. It's risky. We'll do one round and might even rig them, for example. As for how to vote and everything else, well, actually, there's an option for electronic voting. But that's another matter. Can Zelensky be trusted with electronic voting? Or should we turn to some reputable information technology company, say an American one, that would take care of it today? All this allows you to see the number of votes for each candidate live in real time, so there would be no need to count anything by hand afterwards, and so on and so forth. So if we really take this seriously and do it under the control of the United States, then that's good. But if it's going to be some kind of shady deal, which he clearly has in mind, because he knows perfectly well that he will lose this election 100%, since he'll be forced to cancel the telethon, this is the only channel, no matter where you switch, it's all the same propaganda. Things will start to come out, meaning a real political process will begin. He'll pick the 60-day option instead of 90 to avoid giving this more time, to gain momentum. Besides, he somehow didn't mention it, and he's going to lift sanctions from those he imposed them on, targeting political opponents and media figures, and he's going to release political prisoners, and he's going to let everyone who wants to participate. And if, for example, I express a desire to run, will I be able to enter Ukraine, get protection, and be guaranteed political and physical safety and freedom of speech? These questions need answers. Are these real democratic elections, or is he just trying to impress Trump? Look, I got elected again, but he just fakes it for himself, like Putin does.
Yeah, I think that's what he's talking about. I think he's leaning in that direction and leading to the point that really today it's impossible to have a proper election. First of all, a proper election campaign. Yes, that's what you're talking about. Really, there are still a lot of questions that come up here. And how are people supposed to vote? For example, those Ukrainians who are in the trenches today. And how are those Ukrainians supposed to vote who have temporarily, we hope, left the territory of Ukraine? Many people now live in Europe, Canada, and the United States. So how are they expected to vote? And then you gave Kyiv as an example, and I absolutely agree with that. Indeed, in shopping malls, especially now around Christmas and New Year, there will be a lot of people just walking around. But if we take, for example, somewhere like Kramatorsk, which today is actually under siege, well, I put it bluntly, but it's right next to the fighting, or other cities like Kharkiv, for example, which is also bombed from time to time. These cities that are more often subjected to such attacks, yes. So here, what should be done about this?
If I were in Zelensky and Ukraine's situation, which I wouldn't be, I would first hold elections in 2 rounds. Also, the first and second rounds shouldn't be on separate days as they are now. I mean, extending the voting period to a week. Voting would be allowed for a week using a mixed system, either electronic or physical. You can vote in person at polling stations or electronically by phone, but not through Daya. This Ukrainian invention, you've probably heard of it more than once. Daya, which belongs to the state.
No. Can you explain?
Yes, it's an app where you have your passport in electronic form, all your court cases, fines, taxes. You can get them electronically. You can get a certificate there. You don't need to go to some bureaucrat anymore.
I understand.
Everything moves quickly electronically. You can even re-register some things there now, I think. It's under their control, and that can't be allowed. As for a very important point, you mentioned Ukrainians. There are 10 million or even more most likely living abroad today. So what is Zelensky's calculation here? 90% of these people will definitely vote against Zelensky, and his task is what they will do next. This is a historic first, with so many people voting outside the country holding the elections. They will deliberately organize things terribly at the embassies. Less than half will vote, and they will say, well, you see, it's unprecedented. We couldn't organize it. It was very difficult. So they have an entire plan on how to try to bring Zelensky to victory. I believe this should be an appeal to American companies under the patronage of President Trump, under America's control, in electronic form. I don't see how voting today is possible without electronic voting. I wouldn't risk entering the Ukrainian embassy in the United States today. I'll say that.
Well, there really are a lot of doubts here specifically about electronic voting. because we remember how many scandals there were during the American elections when things were also called into serious question. That's what was missing there, including electronic voting and so on. Well then, what do you think, Denis? Will these elections actually take place, or will Zelensky manage to cancel everything after all? Because Trump is quite clear in saying that they need to be held, but again, he doesn't say how, he doesn't provide a mechanism. And do you have any information, for example, since Zelensky said, well, provide it and we'll hold them, provide security? Do you have any information on whether Trump responded to this in any way, whether Americans, and what you were just talking about, whether Americans will help organize and conduct these elections?
Good question. First, we need to distinguish how Trump views the elections, and second, how Zelensky does. I've already discussed this, at least in part. So what is Trump's perspective? Now, a framework peace agreement is being signed, martial law is lifted, Trump as a mediator guarantees that Putin will not bomb, a ceasefire is declared, martial law is lifted, and elections are announced by law in 90 days. Well, that is, let's say, it will be spring of next year, maybe April or May, somewhere around those dates. And then a fully democratic process, as I already said, the end of the television marathon. They want Zelensky to surrender politically. Moreover, I'll tell you this, if Zelensky tries to implement his plan, Trump will knock him out of these elections with compromising material, with sanctions against his inner circle. Because he was given a hint this year that he shouldn't run or think about any kind of future politics in any form or way. But on the other hand, let's remember, we discussed the situation with Yermak. There were several signals. Remove him, get rid of him. He's not acceptable. He's persona non grata. Let's put it unofficially, but they didn't do it. And we all saw how Yermak ended up. The same thing awaits Zelensky. That is to go against the United States of America, to go against Trump, and basically to turn Ukraine into Venezuela in some sense. No one will allow that to happen.
But we can see how Zelensky has already adapted, it seems to me, to the pressure that Donald Trump is putting on him. For example, compare this to last year. We all remember the situation in the White House, not in the Oval Office. I don't remember exactly where, but anyway, in the White House. And today's situation when Zelensky instantly, let's say, grabs the situation and turns it around like this, which is what we're talking about right now. And it really seems like you just can't get close. On the one hand, in my opinion, it's quite possible to do things in such a way that later you can just shrug and say, well, we did everything we could, but it didn't work out. Well, there's a war going on, and we warned you, we told you. Plus, various provocations are possible during the election campaign. Yes, there could be strikes. They might say, we're being bombed. How should we vote and why?
If you mean strikes from Russia. Well, first of all, that's what Trump is for, to give guarantees that this won't happen.
But do you think Putin will go for it?
Of course, yes, because in Anchorage, it was agreed that Zelensky should not be in power in Ukraine. This isn't agreeing to Putin's terms and just fulfilling them. This is Trump's vision. This is Putin's vision. And we can't say here that if Putin sees it this way, then everyone who sees it the same way is a Putinist or bad. No, that's how life is. Putin brushes his teeth too, and we all brush ours. For Putin, an orange is orange, and for us, it's the same. That's about the situation.
I have a question for you, Denis. You said that you would explain later regarding the fact that today, even though the world is looking at the American president and waiting for help from his decision, how he can stop the war. And you just said that Zelensky, even though he is counting on the Americans and their help, is behaving quite unfriendly toward Trump today, provoking his irritation. Why?
This is called, Alexandra, clinging to power by any means. So, there's a situation, let's say there's a day when Trump is active in the media regarding Ukraine and some situation arises and Zelensky acts in that situation. The main idea is, how can I keep power longer? It's not about Ukraine's interests, but about maintaining my own power as long as possible. Today, I'll keep power longer by siding with Trump, so I'll do that and thank him 5 times a day as he likes. Tomorrow, I'll take a risk after losing my temper and seeing things go badly. Yesterday, he was in Italy or the day before yesterday, he met with Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy. For 90 minutes, she urged him to accept the peace agreement since he had no other options. He was in Zugzwang, a hopeless situation. He tried to convince her in return to help since she has a good relationship with Trump, so that Trump would make concessions, meaning we can conclude that in his mind, it's all about getting Trump to make concessions. He doesn't see that stopping the war is necessary. He just wants to keep power. And you know what? He actually recorded a voice message, if you heard, a couple of days ago with a journalist, where he said, "That's it, I'm ready for the elections. I'm asking Europe, together with our parliament's legislation, and America too, let's decide how to do this." He ends by saying he will run for office. During the election campaign, this man said, "I'm running for one term," and repeatedly said, "If I don't end the war, I'll step aside for another president. You shouldn't cling to the office." Poroshenko, who is also my opponent, at the famous stadium debates, he said all the same things. "You must leave, you haven't ended the war." He told people, "If I don't end the war, I will give up my powers myself." When he had interviews with the Western press, he said, "I'm not holding on to power at all." That was Sky News, I think. A few months ago, he said, "I'm ready to leave tomorrow if it helps Ukraine." So Zelensky's departure would benefit Ukraine.
Dennis, what do you think about holding, let's say, well, I guess you could call them early elections? Yeah. So hypothetically, if Trump does manage to push it through, well, honestly, we'll come back to this. But as I understand it, he wants to do it before Christmas or maybe during Christmas. So basically by the end of the year. So if we hypothetically assume that the elections will be scheduled for spring, we clearly understand that most likely there will only be a handful of candidates. Basically, you could count them on one hand. That would be Zelensky, most likely Valery Zaluzhny, and maybe someone else from, let's say, people who, not exactly war hawks, but those who believe it's necessary to keep defending, including, for example, Valery Zaluzhny. Yeah, so these are military people. What do you think in such a short time? Is it possible for someone to really appear on the scene? A person who could actually turn the situation around and lead Ukraine in the direction that Ukrainians really want to live in? Because as you said, about 10 million people are living outside Ukraine today. I'm more than sure that they've already dropped out of this internal Ukrainian politics. Except maybe for Zaluzhny, they don't know anyone else.
So it depends on what format everything will follow. If it goes according to the format that Trump has in mind, then everyone will be allowed to participate, and there will be democratic elections. If Zelensky attempts his own plan and succeeds, which I doubt, none of that will occur. Only chosen candidates will be allowed, and everything will be prearranged. If you're asking me in general what options there are, then under democratic real elections, the person who will win is someone who isn't even included in today's polls. There will be many people who aren't even considered by these big polling companies. They only look at 5 figures.
But nobody knows these people. I mean, maybe in Ukraine, they're known by those who are much closer to Ukrainian domestic politics. But those who have already left, and it's been almost 4 years, they might not know these people at all. Yes, some new names will appear. Yes, some, let's say, presidential programs will appear, but these people don't know them. They've heard like, oh, Valery Zaluzhny is a good, strong guy. Let's vote for him. But it's not a fact that Valery Zaluzhny will even bring about peace.
The whole diaspora is still on the internet. You're on the telethon, but you still won't see it. Actually, no one in Ukraine watches the telethon anymore. Everyone is on the internet. Anyone who still cares about Ukraine already knows or will learn everything. They're following the right sources and will stay informed. People who no longer care about Ukraine now see their lives only in another country. They don't care about Zaluzhny either, but I don't agree with your wording. You say those who are ready to defend in the context of Zaluzhny, as if someone else is planning to surrender Ukraine. We're discussing how fueling war and convincing people we were born to fight endlessly, that this country isn't for happiness or building a future is one approach. Zaluzhny's approach. I'm not even sure Zaluzhny will run for president. Every day we have less and less confidence.
And now perhaps we're coming to another main question, a real stumbling block. Undoubtedly, these are territorial concessions, because I think it's really impossible to consider territorial concessions and the choice of presidents separately from each other. Because it's clear that Putin's main goal is to remove, let's say, Zelensky and his team. And accordingly to fully capture Donbas and Luhansk region. And there, I don't know what long-term plans he might have, but we'll talk about that now. That's what they're talking about in the White House, yes. And here's a big question. Who will really be able to, when a new president comes, what should he do with the territories? Because just giving them away, just signing peace agreements like that is impossible, and you confirm that as well. For that, a referendum is also necessary because according to the Constitution, it can't be done otherwise. Otherwise, well, that's treason. This deal will likely be null and void anyway, since no Ukrainian president can sign it. The question is, what to do with the territories? How to resolve this issue here? And you said it absolutely right. I completely agree with that. What does it mean to defend ourselves if a new president comes and gives away these regions? So is that capitulation?
Dennis, I think you're twisting my words a bit. Did I say any president would give up territories or just Zaluzhny? I said everyone would defend themselves when it comes to defense.
Yes.
Giving up territory isn't the same as giving up Donbas or surrendering. This territory we're talking about is uninhabitable. There won't be any life there in the near future. Whoever controls them, currently our army does, there's no life there. Tomorrow Putin might take over or a buffer zone could be set up, but life still won't return. That's what we're talking about. None at all. That's actually why I went on air, and it seems to many am broadcasting quite aggressively. This is deceiving people about this capitulation. Zelensky presents it like this. They're demanding capitulation from me. They're demanding that I surrender territory. Trump administration lawyers thoroughly studied Ukraine's constitution. Zelensky and the parliament can't surrender territory even if they want to. Even if he's a Kremlin agent and ready to sign tomorrow, he can't do it according to the constitution. It requires a referendum, and a referendum is very complicated. They would probably hold it even today, but the Constitution doesn't allow it. That means martial law needs to be lifted, and 226 votes out of 450 in Parliament need to be gathered. Announce a referendum. It can be held no earlier than 60 days after this, not earlier, but that doesn't mean not later. So it could be in 3 months, 4 months. That's if everything goes smoothly, if there's no resistance in parliament, if they vote. Next, the decision. If we're talking about giving up territory, that's how it's written in the constitution. Not giving up, but changing territory, exchanging territory, let's put it that way. And then you still need to get 300 votes in parliament. If we look at it realistically, it would take about a year, and most likely it's inevitable. Once Ukraine elects a new president and parliament, this will likely be on the agenda, since it is the roadmap agreed upon by Ukraine, the United States, and Russia. Sorry, let me finish. This is a political capitulation, personally, of Zelensky. Ukraine is not going to capitulate. That's not even up for discussion.
Yes, of course.
Putin hasn't taken any regional centers, and capitulation isn't being discussed.
Absolutely accepted, Daniel. The question is, do you think the Americans understand what this is about, what time frame we're talking about? And do you think Russia will agree to this? After all, by and large, right now, things are going very well for Russia in this particular military campaign. Yes, it's slow, yes, with huge losses. But they're digging in, they're continuing to advance, and here they'll have to stop, so to speak, wait until the elections are held and a president is elected, and then resolve the issue of exchanging territories.
I don't want to make Putin out to be a good guy, like everything is smooth, good and clear, and there won't be any tricks from his side. But as I already said, it's not just like they tell us a peace plan with 20 points. There's a whole roadmap behind it. A sequence, we do this, then that, Ukraine's and Russia's obligations follow. Putin won't agree to this without a reason. You've likely seen the data on United States, Russia financial and economic cooperation. Sanctions will be gradually lifted as the roadmap with Russia advances, with all sanctions removed in a few years.
They want to invite us to the G8.
And then there's this, like with the C5 about nuclear powers, to exclude Pakistan from there. Well, I read about it today. that is Japan, India, Russia, China, the United States of America, without Britain, without Germany, without Pakistan, and without the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or rather, without North Korea. So that's how it is. Everything is very complicated. You understand. Everything is very complicated.
I absolutely agree with that.
People just think they handed it over now, right? Right now, we're talking about our troops leaving the territories we control in Donbass. And according to this peace plan, there will be a buffer zone there. This is not a surrender at all. Didn't Israel return land to Egypt and Sinai in 73 territorial exchanges like this have happened throughout history? We were in a tough spot. If anyone claims this is a bad decision and things will improve in a year, let them come on air and realistically explain how Putin won't step down on his own and we clearly can't defeat him militarily. What options are there? I don't like what's happening either. You understand?
Here's a question, Denis. What do you think about the words of one of the Ukrainian politicians that I don't know who Gennady is, so I don't. The territories will be lost regardless. The only question is whether it's by force or voluntarily. Do you agree with this point of view?
Yes, it's obvious. You don't need to be a military expert. Just understand Ukraine's inner workings. And do you believe that any kind of military success can even be expected? With the level of corruption, let's not go far. Just with the level of corruption that exists in Ukraine today. Alexandra, some people are interested in the war. And naturally, some won't like that. People aren't used to this, especially those unfamiliar with the situation. Those wanting the war to continue are the ones who profit from it. No one will say, yes, I'm for the war. Yeah, who would want drones to bomb them or missiles to fly at them? And do you think the soldiers in the trenches, the real ones, not the ones you often see on television who are doing propaganda, but the real people, we all know people like that personally and talk to them. Yeah, everyone says, the sooner the war ends, the better. Yesterday, Ukraine's General Prosecutor's Office made desertion data secret, banning its release. The numbers are catastrophic.
Yes.
By the way, they were mentioned, yes.
I have a question. You just said that those who profit from the war are interested in it. Do you mean both Russians and Ukrainians, right?
As a Ukrainian citizen, I'll discuss only Ukraine. This may also apply to Russia, but I'll focus on Ukraine. So drones, the key finding is this is a new drone war. But 50% of this sector in Ukraine is made up of corruption. So look, it's not just a matter of simply stealing money, but for example, collecting donations from people for your own drone production with a high markup. The drones went to the front, but military sources say 30 to 50% don't even take off. That's what the soldiers at the front report, not just me. Let's remember the defective minds. This is the harsh reality of a post-Soviet state that found itself in this situation, in this rotten system that needs to be changed. Which is what I stand for. And believe me, we could take back the 1991 borders tomorrow, but it would still not be a successful country. There would still be corruption. There would be corruption in Donbass. There would be corruption in Crimea. It was all there. We discussed it with you. You're from Crimea. You know all this better than I do, or at least not worse.
We discussed this extensively before the war, both Ukraine's corruption and its problems. We had a lot of experts on Ukraine, so yes.
Yes, that's right. We talked about this, Denny. We're getting messages, yes, like ask Ukrainian mothers what they want. Zelensky wants to draft another million. Well, I see, yes, but here's a question. What about Ukraine and kickbacks? Well, that's right. But I've heard the opinion more than once that when the war is over, then we'll deal with Ukraine's internal problems, because it's not right to talk about it now. So is it right or wrong, Denis?
That's why I've faced so much hate and heard this mantra repeatedly since 2022. We'll sort it out after the war, but the war hasn't ended for 4 years. When are you going to sort things out and how are you going to do it? While these mantras were going on, Yermak, Mindich, and all the others stole billions of dollars. That's what a lack of common sense looks like. We need to expose the problems, not accuse people who expose them, and most importantly, offer solutions of working for Russia or some other nonsense.
So what's the solution?
Well, you know what I stand for. I stand for capitalism, for a free market in Ukraine, for the freest possible conditions. As Sebastian said, yes, where there is trade, the guns are silent. Yesterday, an Italian newspaper quoted, Witkoff and Kushner convinced capitalists believe that if Ukraine is deeply integrated into global trade, there will be no war there. I don't communicate with them directly, but I have exactly the same opinion and have declared it publicly a long time ago.
Yes, but at the same time, I don't know. You're not reading the chat right now, Dennis. You're not reading it. We're on a first name basis. Someone just accused me here of being impolite, that I'm addressing you informally, but we kind of agreed on that.
We agreed on that with you.
Yes, and about Witkoff and Kushner, that there are only Jews around, and you probably too, Dennis. They're accusing you of that here, and that's why, so to speak, the Zionists are taking this matter upon themselves. How would you react to such a comment?
Yeah, I always laugh at that, you know? On one show, it's anti-Semitism. On another, you're called a Russophobe. On a third, a traitor. That's the kind of terrible times we live in now. That's what censorship leads to.
And what does Denis think about the position of the Russian liberal opposition, which cautiously supports the Ukrainian government and the continuation of the war in this context? Are you familiar with Mikhail Svet?
I'm acquainted with Mikhail Svet in absentia. I had one broadcast at his invitation on the day my mother was arrested. So, I have an extremely negative attitude toward the liberal opposition. I feel contempt for them. For example, when I come across Garry Kasparov in my feed, I boil with anger every time I read him. A person is sitting in the United States of America. All of this has been nurtured. United States Agency for International Development of the dictator Zelensky, who is indeed fighting with another dictator, Putin, and he says, Ukrainians, you can't end the war. Go and fight because Putin is my enemy. Go fight for me. Solve my problems. And meanwhile, I'll sit in America and egg you on to do this for a grant. I'm shocked by this. The same goes for Khodorkovsky and his company. If you read them, their rhetoric is as if someone sat down, wrote a manual, and they all just used artificial intelligence to tweak it a bit and publish it. Honestly, I was shocked by such savagery. So basically, either you're against any dictatorship, Zelensky, Putin, Maduro, Kim Jong-un, I don't care, or the Iranian regime. These people say dictator Zelensky is good because we share interests, but dictator Putin is bad. Is that honest towards people, towards the citizens of Ukraine? Is that honest, even purely ideologically? I'm scared that today the word liberal is basically used to describe leftists. Classical liberalism is similar to libertarianism, and neither Kasparov nor that group relates to liberalism.
By the way, nowadays it's actually very easy to end up in either camp. So, for example, if you start criticizing Zelensky and the continuation of the war, you immediately become a Zed patriot, a secret agent. If you do the opposite, then it's the opposite as well. So there's no reason to be surprised here. Honestly, we've already gotten used to this as long as we haven't completely missed this moment yet. And since we've already mentioned Andrei Yermak, what's going on now with the position or the role of the head of the president's office? Who is the candidate there? Has anyone been appointed, or has anyone been appointed at all? And will anyone be appointed to this position at all?
No one has been appointed yet. It is announced that candidates are being considered. Zelensky himself is already casually saying, maybe this structure isn't needed at all. Maybe we should just create some kind of advisory committee, something like that. And Zelensky says the following point: Budanov is good, Fedorov is good, that one is good, and Shmihal is good. But if they leave their current positions now, there is no worthy replacement for them. Their area will fall apart, and so on. So in a country of tens of millions, are there really no others besides these five? They must be extraordinary, since they are personally loyal to Zelensky. Secondly, he would be glad to bring in a strong security official as a successor, but those, I won't name names now, those who could take that role, they demand the same powers as Yermak, a license to do whatever they want, to appoint people. Well, Fedorov, the one with Daya, supposedly an information technology guy, he's definitely not an aggressive guy, probably already corrupt maybe, but definitely not aggressive. He won't do the things Yermak did, cross the line, and appointing a security official is a typical dictator's move. For example, I'm waiting to see whom he'll appoint, because that will declare his next intention. And now, if we look at what's happening, it's part of the same conversation. Yesterday, I caught myself thinking about this. I watched Zelensky's video address. Almost every evening address he makes, he threatens someone. Before that, he kept talking about National Security and Defense Council sanctions, National Security and Defense Council sanctions. He kept threatening, and imposing them. For the past 2 weeks, it's been the Foreign Intelligence Service. The Foreign Intelligence Service. He's been saying, we're with the Foreign Intelligence Service. Here are the Russian propagandists. We'll punish them, do this and that. He can't govern the country without using force. He can't stop putting these kinds of stamps on people. He can't talk about everyday matters, about how people should live. I remember someone once said, waste them in the outhouse. That's kind of his role model.
By the way, I'm curious, what's going on now with another Andrei Bogdan, the first head of the office? I just remember a big interview. I think Gordon interviewed him, right?
Yes.
That's how he seemed to me, though it was long ago, even before the war. And what's happening with him now?
He lives in Austria, in Vienna. As you can see, he doesn't stand out publicly. Basically, he was a figure, a product of this system, who knew this system very well, and that's no secret. You open any interview, and he uses phrases like experienced bureaucrat. I was looking for experienced bureaucrats. I need experienced bureaucrats. In other words, he's building an experienced, corrupt bureaucracy. He's not a reformer.
I want to ask you a few more questions, Dennis, about the fate of Valery Kolomoisky. And also, I just saw information that Trump said his conversation with European leaders about Ukraine was in rather tough tones. Well, I mean, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Starmer, Macron, the President of France, and the Chancellor of Germany, Merz. And that's when he said that they discussed Ukraine in rather tough tones. There's a comment there. Sometimes you need to give people the opportunity to fight, sometimes not. But the problem with giving people the opportunity to fight is that you lose thousands of people every week. It's ridiculous. All of this is ridiculous. This was just a few hours ago. What do you have to say about it?
I apologize, Sasha, and I apologize to Dennis as well. It's just that we have a phone call. If you don't mind, let's start with that, and then we'll come back to the question that Alexandra asked. Good morning. You're on the air. Hello, what's your name?
Hello, good morning, everyone. I would like to address Dennis. Dennis, tell me, don't you think that Zelensky himself doesn't want this peace for one reason only, that Ukrainians will have a very serious question for him? Was that even possible? So, damn, we could have signed the Minsk agreements back then. No one would have died. We would have kept more territory. So what did people die for then?
Thank you. Yes, we were ready to talk about this.
Of course. Absolutely. That's his fear. I honestly don't know how he's going to go on living. He'll be an outcast, living in a sort of public exile no matter what. And we talk about this all the time. Regarding the Wall Street Journal and what Alexandra just read, I believe that's where I saw it. How could it be any different? So you have the Europeans sitting there, the war hawks, all of them unsuccessful, all with 0 ratings, already in their own countries, Starmer, Macron, Merz, and they're egging us onto war. Show me the French Legion in Ukraine. Show me the British fleet at sea fighting for Ukraine. Show me any German weapons in Ukraine or the German army. So essentially, Ukrainians, sacrifice yourselves while we handle our issues. How is that possible? Trump understood it completely. He invited them to the Oval Office. They smiled, shook hands, kissed, left, and kept pushing their agenda. How is that possible? Trump Jr. said America will no longer be the idiot with a checkbook.
About not being the idiot with a checkbook. He was actually talking at that meeting about being ready to distance himself because what he's saying is ridiculous, that you're losing so many people every week. Well, I wanted to ask you about Ihor Kolomoisky. What's happening today? Did they bring him to court? And what's going on now?
Yes, they brought him to court, and he made several statements. He made a statement that there was an attempt on the life of Timur Mindic in Israel. Yes, they got confused. Basically, for the viewers to understand, Kolomoisky's and Mindic's houses are located next to each other in Israel, as far as I know, in Herzliya, and supposedly the killers went into the wrong house and wounded someone. Mindic's housekeeper is in intensive care. She was wounded by a firearm, and Kolomoisky stated that the 2 killers received this weapon at the Ukrainian embassy in Israel. This is a very serious statement. It's really very serious from an international perspective.
What does that mean, Dennis? I didn't even know about this. all of this? Where did these killers come from? A little more, please.
These are Kolomoisky's words, not mine. He says that these are certain people who were recruited at the embassy and received firearms there as well.
At the Ukrainian embassy?
Yes, in Israel.
Just a couple of days ago, I think we were talking with a blogger from Israel, and I asked him, what do you think if you meet? He's originally from Mykolaiv, Ukraine, but has lived in Israel for some time now. So if you meet Mindich, what will happen? Well, as they say, that's the answer to my question. Dennis, I wanted to ask, what do you think? Is Trump's position today still quite tough towards Ukraine? Many people think that this is sympathy for Vladimir Putin, sympathy for dictators in general. What you were talking about, yes, that is, you are against any kind of dictatorship. Many people are asking why I mention this. It's because of your interesting T-shirt. I also wanted to ask, is there a special reason you wore it, or is it just by chance? Yes, with an image, as I understand, of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And here's a question about the role of Donald Trump himself. First of all, do you agree with the opinion that Trump tends to sympathize with the powerful of this world, with dictators, with Kim Jong-un, whom you mentioned, with Vladimir Putin, and so on and so forth? And regarding his position towards Ukraine, that it would be much easier for him, of course, to break Zelensky, so to speak, than to butt heads with Vladimir Putin.
The wording that Trump is breaking Ukraine, putting pressure on it, no, Trump is personally breaking Zelensky. Trump has sympathy and compassion for Ukraine and Ukrainians. We only hear Trump mention the weekly casualties of President Zelensky and President Putin, but he doesn't seem very concerned about losses on either side, which is important to note. The devil is in the details. At this speech in Doha, Donald Trump Jr. said everything that President Trump cannot say due to the political correctness of the current situation. Trump knows very well what Russia is, what Putin is like. But if you follow his actions, it seems he likes to follow the principle. Keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. And then they just get eaten up. This is what it's related to. Trump is guided by America's interests. For some reason, many of my compatriots and people already brainwashed by corporate mass media who live in the West, not all, but many, have this. This idea that Trump thinks Ukraine is nothing, or that Trump should somehow sympathize with Ukraine, or that he should sacrifice the interests of the United States of America for the sake of Ukraine. But why? Why did our people suddenly decide that they are so amazing, that we are so great? I just feel it.
Here, probably it can be explained because before this, quite recently, the previous presidential administration led by Biden actually sympathized with Ukrainians and helped them. I think that's the only reason.
What did this lead to?
So I wanted to ask, what did this lead to?
It's not a fiction. They just found someone to fix their problems at his cost. Right now, the Europeans, are straining themselves. Why haven't these Europeans and President Biden made any attempt to end the war in Ukraine? There hasn't been a single attempt. I think about this often. I sometimes mention it on air. What if Kamala Harris had won? Today, mobilization would be so extreme that the current one would seem like a fairy tale. 60,000 people a month would be conscripted, leading to lawlessness, with only a little money and weapons given. What will happen to Ukraine in a year? This is a dark chapter in United States history, in my view, because of their actions. Not making a single attempt to sympathize with either the people or Ukraine. Did Biden plan anything? The rhetoric says Trump is bad, but Rubio is considered the most neutral and tolerant on Trump's team. And Rubio comes out and says if Ukraine does everything right, in 10 years, Ukraine's gross domestic product will be higher than Russia's gross domestic product. Prosperity, Uitkov, Kushner trade. Where did the Democrats have such theses? No one there considered Ukraine a serious country that could actually live normally, really. It's just a buffer and let them solve our problems there. The Europeans thought exactly the same way. It's all on the surface. Trump is bad, but Trump is the only one who wants peace. Trump is bad, but Trump is the only one who talks about the victims. It's amazing how effective this propaganda is. Goebbels couldn't compare.
Dennis, then I can't help but ask you a question that is probably on many people's minds. In your opinion, who started this war?
What do you mean? Russia, of course. That's it.
Well, just so there are no more questions from anyone. Because as soon as we start talking about the role of the United States, let's say under Biden's presidency, and the role of the United States already under Trump's leadership, immediately there are different opinions about who actually started the war. Well, the United States started the war there, using others' hands.
You know, I can tell you something about this case. If you Google my first and last name, you'll find a page on Astrakhan 24, a media outlet with a text saying, Yeliseyev, this is a fratricidal war started by NATO. Below is a link to my stream. And if you open this stream, of course, there couldn't even theoretically be anything like that there.
That's why I asked, so that no one would have any questions about what we're talking about right now.
If propaganda wants, you know what it can do. Pretty much like I described, well, just like that.
Well, yeah.
Trump has already said more than once that this is Biden's war, and that if he had been president at the time, none of this would have happened. By the way, I actually believe that, but you still haven't told me about this. Our listeners and viewers are asking about Igor, about Kolomoisky.
Yes, we didn't finish. Yes. So what was the question there?
What's happening with him now? What's going on in court? And in general, what awaits Kolomoisky today, and what is his fate?
There are many court hearings ahead. Today, he made that statement about Mindich and the assassination attempt I mentioned, and he promises to make more statements, but in writing. I also saw several, you could even say complimentary, words addressed to Zelensky.
Why, Dennis?
For example, he said, I have mixed feelings about Yermak's resignation. Zelensky is now without his right-hand man. Well, something like that. You know, this just proves that in this kind of situation, there can only be situational allies. That's one thing. And secondly, these are products of that old system. Even phrases like that. That's the only thing I can chalk it up to. Maybe he has some kind of super combination, a super strategy, and he just needed to say it. But we're waiting for further statements. Many people are concerned about his health in the detention center given the current situation.
Well, of course. And what do you think? Where could Kolomoisky get information from? I mean, any information at all? And in particular about the assassination attempt in Israel.
They have houses next to each other in Israel with Mindich right next door. Second is the Jewish community. And third, well, I think he has very good connections in Israel as well. They officially contacted Israeli police, who denied the incident, but later learned the Israeli special services, not the police, are handling the case under special supervision. It's also serious and basically very logical. I'm neither denying nor confirming, just discussing his words.
Well, yes, Herzliya, by the way, is exactly the city where all the wealthy and influential people settle. Have you been to Israel, by the way, Dennis?
Yes, of course.
Yes, of course, you mentioned that. But then why do you have complaints? Why do Russians get so upset when our Zelensky says to Trump, no territories for Putin, you'll get nothing, not Ukraine? Isn't that patriotic?
And who is Russian? Where did this person see a Russian?
Well, obviously somewhere. Russians get upset because Zelensky says something to Trump. So the point is that Zelensky is a real patriot of Ukraine. Or not.
I see. He probably thinks there are some Russians on the air here, or I can't understand why he wrote that. Do you know who that is? This is a typical idiot with a brainwashed mind, but I just can't call such people anything else. I'm not insulting, just diagnosing. He's just sitting, basking in his greatness. Because Zelensky sent Trump away, you understand? Not because Ukraine has high gross domestic product freedom or achievements, but because he sent him away. It's just like how Russians sit. And we have nukes like that. Tomorrow we'll wipe Berlin and Miami off the map. Same values, just reversed. And I'm fighting against this. And today I'm speaking out against Zelensky. Well, first of all, it's dangerous. And second, I'm not speaking for Russia. I'm not speaking against Zelensky personally, but against his policies. I'm upset that thieves are robbing the country. They allowed the war, and now I'm the enemy while he's seen as the good guy, even though he's corrupt. What do these people think? It's their core beliefs.
You know, it feels like these are not very good questions.
Yes, please.
It seems like you support Putin, that there will be a tribunal. And the whole world will learn the truth about Ukraine and the role of Europe and America. Putin and Lavrov talked about this last week. You call yourself a patriot of Ukraine, Dennis, but you sound like you're a patriot of a completely different country, specifically the United States. If you support Trump, why?
Those are two different questions. Did you notice?
Those are two different questions, yes.
Oh, then let's get back to the T-shirt, Dennis. Why do you have it?
I support it
Is that some kind of statement?
a long time ago, long before the election campaign. Actually, I'm saying that this will be salvation for Ukraine. Also, I'm a fan maybe of Elon Musk. Common sense, these are two people who represent common sense in America today. I support them and openly say so, and I didn't just start saying this yesterday. In Ukraine, many changed their stance after Trump's win. I didn't. If someone supports Putin now, they should check those rumors, you know? Today, artificial intelligence can analyze not just our broadcast, but all broadcasts ever.
By the way, did you hear how it analyzed Crimea? There was a scandal, Besogan, that very Nikita Mikhalkov.
No, I haven't heard.
He was asking, you see, about Crimea. And artificial intelligence told him that it's illegally occupied Ukrainian territory. And he didn't expect that. He started commenting, it was interesting.
Please ask Dennis, under what conditions could a civil war start in Ukraine?
If the special services decide so, or if there is a very serious attempt with huge resources invested by Putin, but I give that no more than a 10% chance. I still believe in the common sense of the people, and even in the common sense of the person who for some reason is listening to me right now and associating me with Putin.
By the way, Dennis, it's interesting. I've been meaning to ask you, today we live in a time when you could say everything is mixed up. Remember that phrase, everything got mixed up, horses and people. For example, in Russia. It seems to me, as we were saying earlier, in this environment of opposition views, yes, there is also some kind of split. I mean, it seems to me that people are trying to stand out, like who's more oppositional, who's speaking louder, who's being tougher. As soon as someone says something wrong, expresses themselves the wrong way, or phrases something incorrectly, they immediately get put on the other side, into the department with employees of the State Security Committee, the Federal Security Service, and so on and so on. Does something like this exist in Ukraine? Because, for example, sometimes you see videos that, well, sometimes come from Ukrainian soldiers who, for example, are also upset. They sit in the trenches fighting and they also understand everything perfectly. They also see everything clearly. Naturally, and the commanders too, right? Well, let's be honest, it's all very similar. And the system of corruption is basically the same everywhere. Nothing new has been invented. It's just as it was before. Maybe only the scale is different in some places. I still have a big question about that. So there are, let's say, bad Russians and good Russians, but as I understand it now, there are also good Ukrainians and bad Ukrainians. Those soldiers say in Kyiv, people are enjoying restaurants and having fun, while we're here risking our lives. What are we fighting for? Does this exist in Ukraine today? Is there a division within society during the war? Like people asking, where were you? Well, not 8 years ago, of course, but more like, what were you doing during the war?
There is a division in society, and this division was created by the state, stimulated by the state, and the state encouraged people who contributed to this division in every possible way, including financially, through its propagandists. That is, propagandists who, about 2 years ago, went on air and almost cursed at Ukrainian women who left for Europe with their children. Go back to Ukraine, they said, about language, religion, and politics. You don't have to look far. Here, Alexandra read out a comment. And you know, for this person, it's like for Russians. Putin equals Russia, Russia equals Putin. For them, Ukraine equals Zelensky. And why is that? Excuse me? As Shevchuk recently said on air, motherland is not the president's ass for me, but for this person, it seems it is.
Dennis, people will ask, Dennis, at least give us a link to this stream. It's very interesting. I don't know how you can just go to Radio Vera. What do you mean? Give a link to the stream?
I don't know. I reposted it from your group.
Please find out from Dennis if Kolomoisky will completely leak everything against Zelensky. We're waiting for him to be publicly accused of corruption.
I hope he will, but he's just one link in a huge chain that will work against Zelensky. This is a political game. We all hope it will happen. We all hope it will happen.
Dennis, don't you understand that in reality, the situation between Russia and Ukraine is basically about security officers and performers, while Slavs are fighting each other and someone else is rubbing their hands in satisfaction? Isn't that clear to you?
So am I really that far from this position? For example, you see, I don't like Russians who support Putinists. Like you said about Shelest, I often encounter this on air. Well, first of all, they call me a Russophobe, and there's always something nasty in the comments. So they hate Ukrainians, but why do you hate them? Did we come to take your territory or teach you how to live? Nobody bothered you. The same hatred exists toward America and Western civilization. Yesterday, I lost my temper and told them about Lend-Lease and the humanitarian aid to Russia. The United States helped during the poverty of the 90s, but that's now forgotten. Someone else pushed me into it. You see, this is madness. I don't know how long recovery will take for both nations.
You've only been living in the United States for 3 years. Dennis, you don't even know Ukraine anymore. People ask you about Ukraine and Ukrainians. They should be asking you about America, which you love so much and praise Trump so much. And what's happening in the country where you were born and lived, you're not really familiar with that anymore, so to speak. I'm trying to tell you all this in a polite way, not the way it's written here. Does it happen that you get such questions, such comments, Dennis?
Never. 90% of my content is about Ukraine, and I get millions of views from Ukrainians on all social networks. Would Ukrainians watch a person who is physically in Ukraine according to analytics, but who doesn't understand anything about Ukraine's internal affairs? Not praising Zelensky means I don't understand. If I had a Russian audience and didn't praise Putin, I'd be called an uneducated scoundrel. But if I praised Putin, people would say, oh, wow, he's so smart. Do you understand that story?
Well, yes. Dennis, tell me, please, when people write to you, or, well, I don't know, you don't take calls on your stream, do you? Yes?
Well, I work with the chat. I don't take calls.
So when they write to you, like they just did, saying that you're actually a traitor because you're a traitor to Ukraine, because you support the United States, you support Israel. Although we haven't said anything about Israel today, except for what was, so to speak, allegedly an attempt at what we talked about today. Or like when you, from my point of view, listening to you, during this time, since it ended, there was the show, and we started communicating after that. So it's been almost a month. Yes, if someone asked me who is a patriot of Ukraine, as I understand it, I would name Balashov and Yeliseyev. But those people who write to you saying that you are a patriot of the United States or Israel, what does that mean? Why?
I don't know, but I'm afraid of something else. Why does a person put Ukraine on the opposite side of the barricades from Israel and the United States? I mean, which side are they putting Russia and Iran on, or what? Let him say it, you know? This is exactly one people, this meme, one people, it turns out. We can draw that conclusion from these comments. I went to the United States to escape persecution because it's the freest country in the world, and I fully share its values. If I shared Putin's values, I would have no problem moving to Russia with my family, but I don't share them, and I want Ukraine to be part of Western civilization. What does this person want from me? I don't know. What would be patriotic on my part? To die in a trench while Mindich is carrying out bags of cash, that would be patriotic. Just let him say it. Let him write it down.
They're writing, why aren't you in the trenches? Dennis, I just don't read it.
You can read it. I have since day one. I went on air during the war a week later and immediately stated it. I already went through this during the Maidan when I almost ended up in the place where people died. I went through all of that. I had about a day and a half of that urge. But then I calmed myself down, and today I imagined, what if I had gone to the front? I would have been killed and my family would have been left without their only breadwinner. And Yermak at this time is feeling just fine with billions of dollars. I'm not saying that only fools went to the front and I'm smart. No, honor and praise to those who went. I'm expressing my point of view absolutely openly. And if I didn't care about Ukraine, I would only talk about the United States, for example, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I've been doing this, just for the record, for 3.5 years.
Dennis, are Russians and Ukrainians one people? They ask you?
If we're talking memes, yes. I hope not, but a few years ago I would have been offended, while today I really think about it.
Dennis, why? Dennis, why?
I just explained them because we easily caught the obscurantism from the Russians. We fell for the same propaganda tricks. There's a complete lack of common sense, an immature society, post-communist.
716 70 67, that's our live studio number. We're telling our radio listeners first. Joining us is the public figure and entrepreneur Denis Yeliseyev. Denis, I wanted to ask you, first of all, to add to what we're talking about right now. Just now, Medusa published, Zelensky did not rule out that the issue of Ukrainian territories could be decided in elections or a referendum. He said this in an interview. His statement was reported by Roz Business Consulting Ukraine. But I still wanted to talk a little about the role of Europe. Right now, we're talking a lot about the role of the United States, about the personal role of Donald Trump in terms of resolving the situation. But somehow we completely forget, or rather we haven't talked about the role of Europe. How do you see the role of Europe? Because many people believe that it's actually the Europeans who want this war to continue, that they don't want peace. What do you think? Is that true? And if it is, why doesn't Europe want peace? Why is this war beneficial for them?
Europe benefits from the war. Europe wants peace. Europe. And these drones that Putin launched, they got scared. They realized they were absolutely not prepared for this. When the drones were launched, Poland, I think, scrambled F-35S and fired missiles. I think €1 million per missile at a drone that costs $5,000. Do you understand? That is Putin in 3 seconds and for $2,000 makes them spend millions of dollars. That's what's frightening. No one expected this. Why? For years they bought energy from Putin and did nothing else, wasting half of taxes on bureaucracy and themselves. Ursula von der Leyen is picked by bureaucrats, not European Union citizens. How is that possible? So what were they doing? That's it. Canceling elections in Romania, interfering in elections in Moldova. Those are purely Putin's methods. They fined Elon Musk 140 million because he doesn't want to censor. How does that even align with the values of Western civilization? That's why they need time. And who can give them that time? Ukraine. There's a president there who's ready to drown the country in blood. We'll use that and provoke all of it.
How does Dennis assess Ukraine's demographic losses? Will the country be able to overcome them, considering the low birth rate and aging population? For Ukrainians, is the loss of land scarier than the prospect of losing the nation?
For me, human life is priceless and far more important than territory. The demographic crisis is already happening and widely documented. In high school classes today, there are almost no children left. Most have left as mothers fear for their sons due to the war, and mothers of daughters say, oh, there are no grooms left. So they also take their daughters away. So how will it be? How do we know who the next president will be, or even the next two presidents? Everything will depend on that. If the country is made into a place people want to return to and where it's beneficial to do so, then everything will be fine. But a lot of work needs to be done for that.
In 2014, Denis, you were in Ukraine. How do you feel about the Maidan of 2014? Was it a people's revolution for you or a technological government coup?
I participated in that Maidan. At the time, I knew nothing about United States Agency for International Development and no one was funding me. It was simply a pure idea and that was the motivation. It was a fight for Western values, or at least that's what I thought. Now I can say it was a coup carried out by United States Agency for International Development and other organizations. Unfortunately, it brought nothing to Ukraine. I realized this during the Maidan itself. You see, I was more against than for. Against what Yanukovych was doing, I was never for Poroshenko. You won't find a single piece of evidence of that. Neither Tyanibok nor Klitschko, these Maidan leaders, nor Yatsenyuk, I was never for them, nor for Timoshenko. They are all the old gang of these corrupt officials.
And here it's a bit harsh, Denis, but I have a good attitude towards Denis. He finally realized that politicians are no different from each other. The question is about the institutions that keep these gentlemen in check. So all politicians are the same, especially when you talk about Trump or when he is a politician who, in my opinion, came at a very timely moment he always says America first, right? But still, when he is asked questions about how he will help Ukraine and Russia, he keeps repeating the same thing. Let me tell you one thing. Tomorrow we will have. Surely you know who Konstantin Borovoy is, right? Konstantin Natanovich lives in Los Angeles, and he applied for political asylum. And for the fourth time, he was denied. And he wrote a letter to Trump. This is not a joke. The letter is on the internet. I'll send it to you, asking him for help. And Trump sent a reply. I read this reply today. I'll send it to you too. You'll find it interesting. He writes that, yes, of course, or rather, Borovoy addresses Trump with the question that you are banning the entry of refugees. It's not that you're banning them, but you're reducing the number of Ukrainian and Russian refugees. This is a mistake. It's wrong. And here's an example. I can't go back to Russia for obvious reasons. It's not safe. To this, Trump replied that it's right that attention should be paid to both Ukrainians and Russians, but America first. And if it's bad for America, the entry of any immigrants, any refugees, then it won't happen. So is Trump acting correctly in this situation?
I believe that for America, accepting, frankly speaking, mostly white Christians is definitely better. So that situations like the recent one, where that animal killed 2 National Guardsmen, don't happen. And before that, there were many other incidents. I think this is an issue that hasn't been fully studied yet.
Whose thoughts are you referring to?
The Trump administration's... That is, we need to approach this in a more differentiated way. But I can't criticize, because they were born here and it's up to them to decide.
Today you spoke, Dennis, about Israel. Then answer this question. Would Israel give up its territories to make peace with the Palestinians?
That's not a good example. Israel is stronger than Palestine by default, making it a different situation. I won't answer that. I can't speak for Israel or imagine these scenarios. I'm a Ukrainian citizen discussing Ukraine specifically, and I'm deeply involved in this issue. People will understand in time. I've talked about this, Alexandra, for years. For years, YouTube channels funded by the United States of America made videos against me in 2022. Look at what he's saying. Do you know what I meant? It's what is happening now. Not because I'm some top analyst, but because it's common sense. I said it out loud when no one else did. That's why it's not a good example. Israel exchanged territories, as we discussed today, in '73 with Egypt.
What do you think, Dennis, when it comes to ending the war? What should be the strongest argument today? Or who, in other words, who can stop the war today categorically and definitively? And is it possible?
No, only Trump can do that. No one else. There are simply no other options. Practice has shown that. Biden could have prevented this war altogether. Before the war, there was a Russia-United States summit, something like that, in Geneva, Switzerland. We all understand that Putin voiced his plans to Biden there. Biden came out and said, well, not on television, but that Ukraine would be captured in 3 days. Why didn't you try to stop it? Well, we can only speculate.
Dennis, would you like to have a debate? I've already asked this question, but this person insists on Radio Vera, specifically on this radio station, on the topic, Democracy, the Overthrown Wolf. You have diametrically opposing views on this topic, or will you not go?
I can attend any debate. That's not an issue. I just find it odd to have a debate between 2 libertarians. Ideally, debates should be with people holding different views. As we're discussing today, that's my perspective.
Your opponents have gone so far. They're writing that you should be stripped of your Ukrainian citizenship. What other passports do you have, if I may ask? If you don't want to answer, of course, you don't have to.
I won't answer that. For obvious reasons, I won't answer about citizenship. But see, that's how it is. Today, my namesake asked me about discord in Ukraine. If you look at social media, you'll see some Ukrainian citizens wanting to lynch others. Lynch in the literal sense of the word. Look at the speakers. They say those who aren't fighting should be stripped of their property. Take it away and divide it up. Just like Sharikov from Heart of a Dog. I'm not joking. That's exactly what they say. Yes, yes, Dennis.
The essence of the conflict is basically the same as, let's say, inside Russia. That is, whether you support the president in Russia, specifically Putin, and accordingly the war in Ukraine. And in Ukraine, whether you support President Zelensky, the continuation of the war, or you don't support it and want what they call peace. Yes, so that's how it is.
What you mentioned today is the most obvious reason. Besides that, there's the language issue, the religious one, the general political situation, and separately, sympathy or antipathy towards the United States. In short, all of this is done for a reason, and I want to explain why. You fight each other, lynch each other, do whatever you want. But don't interfere with our stealing. If you focused on that, no one would remember Mindich. That's the point. And these foolish people, I could have just ignored Ukraine after coming to America and avoided this situation, but I got involved. People don't even realize the financial losses I suffered. I can't just go around complaining. They don't know that. Should I tell again what happened to my family because of my speeches? Should I tell how many times I was threatened with death, even in America? And where was I supposed to turn about this? I can tell about it. Why did I need all this? I'm a well-off person with a successful business. I could have just put on a tactical t-shirt, started a charity foundation, bought body armor for $30,000, no problem. I won't say which three-letter organization. And I could have felt great, not speaking out at all, just living my own life. I could have done that. Today, I'm fighting, including for the rights of that idiot who's writing this, for his rights too, because they want to raise his taxes. They want to get rid of him. It's my opponents who are destroying Ukraine, not me. I paid taxes there, created jobs. That's the stupidity of the people. You understand? We speak, everything is questioned the way I say it, not the way they say it, and life doesn't teach them anything. Well, let them step on the same rake again. Let them elect Zelensky again. Let them elect Zelensky again. Then I'll just lose it and stop speaking out. I'll say, that's it. I've done everything I could.
You won't name anyone from, let's say, that list we don't know, right? Or those candidates for Ukrainian president we don't know. Maybe someone you like. You don't have to do it. I'm just asking.
No, Dennis, I won't say.
Got it. There's one more topic that we probably haven't really discussed today, or rather haven't discussed at all. Actually, this topic comes up because of a statement he made just recently at the security conference in Berlin that's happening right now. He said, we are Russia's next target. War will come to every home of those who live in Europe. These talks about Russia attacking Europe or one of the European countries seem to be getting stronger and stronger now, and I think not a day goes by, at least in Europe, without someone mentioning it. That is, it's constantly being talked about in Europe. Do you actually believe that Russia is capable of attacking a NATO country and standing up to NATO today? And if so, then the question is, why would Putin need that?
I absolutely do not believe that. As I already said, in 4 years, Putin hasn't captured a single major city in Ukraine. 4 years. Just think about that. A ground war against NATO is hopeless. The United States, a NATO member, has thousands of tomahawks that could destroy the entire Russian army. Why would Putin need that? That's the second question. Comparing Putin to Hitler isn't accurate. Putin enjoys a comfortable, well-fed life. He's not someone who'd sit in a bunker obsessing over ideology. He's pragmatic and knows what he's doing. Why is it Ruta? I don't know. I know the numbers for how much Europe buys energy resources from Putin, and they've been buying all these years. I know those numbers well. I don't understand why NATO countries are so reluctant to pay 5% in NATO contributions. They pay 2, 2.5%, and at the same time shout, Putin will attack us. Where's the logic in that? Where's the common sense? In my opinion, big changes are brewing in Europe. It's time to return to the roots, to true values, and this bunch of bureaucrats should be sent where they belong.
Dennis, here's a question that I think you were asked today, but for some reason it just came to my mind now, since you already mentioned it. Let's say about Vladimir Putin's character. What do you think, in your personal opinion, why did Putin attack Ukraine?
There are several reasons. First, he deeply resents the West because of what he's heard about himself, psychologically speaking. Second, with a weak United States president and an unclear leader in Ukraine, he seized the opportunity. Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan played a part too. I think he acted with a certain mockery, even launching drones at Europe in that spirit. Like, hey, go ahead, I'm bending you all over. Well, I can literally read that on his face during his speeches. This is just a phenomenal failure, both of the intelligence services and of Europe as a whole, to raise a dictator who will then, well, for me, Ukraine is Europe now, attack that same Europe and today even finance it. I just can't wrap my head around how this could have been allowed to happen. Where did Schröder work after being chancellor? At Gazprom. There are all sorts of strange, unclear stories about Merkel, so there are a lot of unanswered questions and all of this together. But I don't want to dwell on this topic too much today. Personally, Zelensky also took part in this. Trump talked about it. Trump. That at the first meeting between Zelensky and Putin, Zelensky said, I'll get Ukraine back, we'll join NATO, in an aggressive manner toward Putin. I think, where did this happen? Then I realized it was at the Normandy 4 meeting with Macron, Merkel, Putin, and Zelensky, right after Zelensky became president. There's a video online showing Zelensky's antics with the KGB guy taking notes. The issue was whether to withdraw troops from Donbass before elections or vice versa. Zelensky focused on this problem. Andriy Bodan, as you said, told Gordon in an interview, we tricked Putin. He said, Zelensky spoke to Putin the wrong way. Gordon asks, how would you characterize Putin? A very tough person and a very tough negotiator. I've never seen anyone like that in my life. So was it smart for Zelensky to start measuring up against Putin like that? We didn't start this war. You can't attack no matter what happens. That's clear. But did we do everything to prevent it? Let's put the question that way. I think definitely not. Zelensky acted like a boy who was dared. KVN wanted to prove to the KGB, we're cooler.
Interesting, thank you.
Dennis, I have a question for you. It's strange to me, someone writes, that as a libertarian, you're so in love with democracy, while in the West, libertarians are the main critics of democracy.
I completely agree, especially with the Libertarian Party of the United States of America. And where is the Libertarian Party of the United States of America today? Where? At the bottom. No results, no chances. Absolutely no chances, not even theoretically. And do you know what the mistake is? The same one that exists with the libertarians in Ukraine. They studied the best libertarian books thoroughly. Some became highly academic libertarians on YouTube with 250 listeners, but he's considered the top libertarian in Ukraine and worldwide. Meanwhile, Javier Milei actually fought for and took power, acting in real practical conditions. That's it. And when I say democracy, do you want to say that you can jump straight from a backward Soviet mindset to libertarianism? Or are there steps? That's what I'm talking about. I look at things realistically.
Dennis, regarding your move to the United States, is it a matter of safety or not? And have there been any sanctions imposed on you and your family today?
So as I said before, it's purely a matter of personal safety. And the fact is, I can't live under a dictatorship. When I felt it was starting, I just couldn't imagine living without being able to express my opinion, living and being told how to live, marching in line. It's just not for me, physically. As for the repression, well, I've talked about it many times, and I mentioned it today and in the last broadcast about my mother. They just went after my family.
If I may ask, what was the main reason for this pressure? Was it your public statements, your active presence on social media, or something else?
Of course, my media activity. That's the only reason I didn't say anything else. Like in the first 3 months of the existential war, I think I supported Zelensky. If you watch those videos, you might see it that way. And then, when they stopped being together with the people and, as was the custom before, started living a different life, not sharing the same table and doing their own thing, I realized where this was headed, the refusals from Istanbul and everything else. What support was possible? Then the dictatorship started. During the war's first 4 months, you could freely express any opinion about Zelensky, Yermak, or anything else. People didn't argue with each other. The Russian language wasn't even on the agenda. The agenda was, there's a missile, the Russians are near Kiev. That was the agenda. We were all together. Did I share this on air or not? Let me tell you, the first day of the war, and I went with another family member to a regular grocery supermarket, which was being emptied out. And the girls who worked as cashiers, they were working like that on the first day of the war. Just imagine that shock. Their hands were shaking like this, and they were taking some calming pills and doing their job. I watched and thought, a person came to work, she has a family, and today she's selling food with trembling hands, and she's working, and nothing collapsed. So was it Zelensky who told her, you work for me? Or is she just like that on her own? And what does Zelensky have to do with it? What I mean is that it wasn't Zelensky who ran away, but the heroic people and the heroic army, and we were all together. And then Zelensky was able to hold on to power only by dividing people, only by dividing people. Divide and conquer. Well, I admit, he managed to do that successfully.
And this division of people turned out to be successful. Dennis, what do you think? Why is it that if a girl who works at a grocery store, who has a family, as you said, who takes pills, whose hands are shaking, she came to work not because Zelensky forced her to? How could such people be broken and divided? Why did he succeed in doing this? What do you think?
There is still some immaturity among the people. Ukrainians lack what Americans have. I won't mention Canadians since you know more about them. An American won't let anyone violate his rights. The right to bear arms and free speech are part of him. And Ukraine is a post-communist state that is used to relying on the government, not on itself. And somewhere in their minds that played a role. And then when you're in a cocoon, in an information bubble, it still has an effect. I just felt sorry watching some of my friends and acquaintances who are reasonable and successful people in society. And gradually, they started to develop different views. But yes, it's bad. But yes, we need to stop. But that's it. This is what propaganda does. That's why I say Goebbels would be impressed. I want to say that Ukrainian propaganda has outdone the Third Reich and Russia today.
Why do you think Russian propaganda isn't as skilled as Ukrainian propaganda? Just look at Solovyov.
Thanks to our actions, because today Solovyov or Skabiva don't even need to make anything up anymore. They can just take real Telegram channels, YouTube channels, all these videos, and just show them to Russians. That's it. There's no need to invent anything. We did this ourselves in our country. The Territorial Recruitment Center wasn't involved yet. My early YouTube video suggested how to stop what eventually happened. When they closed the border, it was a terrible mistake to close the border. So you don't trust your own citizens. You're saying, I'm going to keep you here by force. Love me by force. After that, millions lost trust in the government, maybe even any remaining love. Look at the reaction of the men who are in Ukraine today and who will leave once the border is opened. Maybe they'll come back later, but they feel a terrible resentment toward the government. It was terribly unfair, completely unfair. That was just the first blatant mistake. I pointed it out right away, and nothing happened to me for it at the time. Nothing. Everything would start later.
Please tell me, when you pointed out this mistake, were you still in Ukraine?
Of course, it was March of 2022. Of course, I suggested a solution. You know, it was a terrible solution. I can say it now. It was a terrible solution. Well, in general, in my understanding of life. But today it's a great solution. I said, charge $5,000 exit fee if you're already doing this. Donate to the Ukrainian Army Fund transparently with website updates showing incoming amounts. A man buys a ticket that lets him enter and exit as often as he wants. This isn't about mobilization, just coming and going. But then our military commissars showed up. You saw that, right? A house in Spain, 2 million euros, 3 million euros in cash, 55 pairs of Rolexes. Yesterday, the one who drank beer and earned $300 a month and didn't want or demand anything more from life. Today, they are multimillionaires, and they were the ones who brought things to the top. And today, mobilization is a business. There are price tags, and I didn't say it. Everyone knows. Even there, guests who speak Ukrainian prefer not to discuss it. And I'm the bad guy because I'm exposing it.
A phone call. Excuse me. We have a phone call. Good morning. You're live. What's your name?
Morning, my name is Mikhail.
Good morning, Mikhail.
I have a question. Well, first of all, I would like to say something regarding Kolomoisky and his statements. But for some reason, the Israeli police do not confirm that there was an attack on Mindik. So, and before that, it was said that supposedly these two people who carried out the assassination attempt were caught. But the Israeli police do not seem to confirm this. That's right. And here's the question. Dennis, tell me, well, not you, but actually Donald Trump said that 84% of Ukrainians are against it. The Zelensky administration and so on. Here's the question. Where is the Maidan? Where are those freedom-loving people of Ukraine who can overthrow any bad government? Or was there actually a third force on the Maidan back then that in fact pushed Ukrainians toward this action? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mikhail, I'm answering all your questions, but it seems you either missed the start of the broadcast or weren't listening closely. Regarding Mindic, the Israeli police said this didn't happen because the case is under the control of the Israeli Special Services. Kolomoisky said they were caught. If that's true, special services are handling it since it's too serious for just the police. That's the first thing. Second, Trump said that 82% of Ukrainians are for peace, not against Zelensky or anything else. For peace, but a huge percentage are really against Zelensky. Why isn't there a Maidan? Because the country is under martial law and a dictatorship. It's a dictatorship. You can't organize a Maidan. Not the kind of Maidan we're talking about. As a person, as Mikhail imagines, I was saying today, it's a United States agency for international development technology with billion-dollar budgets, but you can't build it in a country where people aren't massively dissatisfied with the government. So we recently saw something like this in Serbia, large protests. You can't organize a large protest even if you have $10 billion, if people aren't truly dissatisfied with the government. That's all there is to it. That's why no Maidan is led in a dictatorship. Why isn't there a Maidan against Putin in Russia?
Why?
In 5 minutes, you'll be in a police van and then in prison. In Ukraine, you could end up on the front lines right away as an assault trooper.
Tell me, Denny, all the crooks from Russia with the people's money run to Israel, but also from Ukraine, and Israel accepts these criminals. I've already asked this question, the Israeli topic. You've already said you're talking about Ukraine, but still, what do you think? Why?
Honestly, I've never heard of that. They check so thoroughly at Ben Gurion. I have no idea who got in or how. Maybe Mindic's murder didn't happen because that's not how things are done in Israel, and such things aren't acceptable in the international community, like in Vienna, Austria. Well, that's just lawlessness, but I can't comment on Israel. If I lived there, I would comment.
You know, Dennis, there's something I want to tell you. I've watched your streams a bit, Shelest, Alexander Shelest, right?
Yes.
Yes, and there are your streams that you record yourself. And I can say that, well, if someone asks me, well, you know, it happens to us. Roman Tsimbalyak, Ivan Yakovin, and there was also Alina Kurbanova. Mark Fagin isn't Ukrainian, but he's pro-Ukrainian and is described here as a patriot of Ukraine.
Yes.
You just don't understand who a true patriot of Ukraine is. That's Mark Fagin. And that's why you shouldn't attack Jews and so on and so on. If I asked you today, among those we've listened to, the more popular journalists and the less popular ones, who? Are you personally acquainted with any of those I mentioned? And if so, what kind of relationship do you have with these people?
I don't know them personally, but I'm aware of their media work. Fagin is a Ukrainian patriot. Like all those who work for money, they exploit Ukraine's grief and misfortune, making money off of it. And Yeliseyev, who lost money because of his pro-Ukrainian stance, is actually not a patriot, but Fagin is a patriot. That's why the situation in Ukraine is happening, because people think this way.
Well, and people wrote a lot of nice things to you here, so out of all the nasty comments.
You don't have to read the good stuff, you can read the bad stuff, because that might, so to speak, make for interesting content. I don't cry over any questions.
Well, yes, Ukraine can't be based on the principle of federalization because it was never like that in Kievan Rus or afterwards. So the country, what's your comment on that?
People used to ride donkeys, and today they drive cars, even electric cars, so if you look at it that way. Here's the argument I get as a federalization supporter. People say if Putin tears Ukraine apart, it will collapse. I ask, with a unitary Ukraine, we lost 25%, but a federal one didn't last a day. How do you know that? And there will be no answer.
According to the Constitution, all men are required to defend the country. That's clear. It seems you don't agree with that.
The Constitution also says a lot about human rights, and I know the Constitution pretty well. Well, not at the front. Yes, Yeliseyev, not at the front. I'm not hiding, and I'm telling you, even now, if I were alive in a trench seeing all this, I can imagine how much I'd regret being there.
Well, they're writing here that you and Balashov have the same tone. I'm just not quite sure if that's good or bad. From my point of view, it's good, but for the person writing it, probably not so much. Dana, well, thank you so much. We've taken up a lot of your time. We agreed on an hour. But your visits to us, yes, your appearances on Radio Vera, as Dennis said today, are becoming a tradition. And I think it's a worthy tradition. And I'm very grateful to you for coming. Last time you told me that your wonderful, charming wife said I was giving you too many compliments. Today I tried, Dennis, to do it differently, but it still didn't work out very well for me. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Thank you.